The shift began quietly, almost unnoticed, until the effects hit with full force. A set of tariffs that were originally meant to target raw steel and aluminum unexpectedly expanded to include a long list of everyday products. Items found in nearly every home were suddenly caught in a tightening net of new costs. What started as a policy aimed at strengthening American industry quickly turned into a financial shockwave that rippled across supply chains, manufacturing centers, and consumer markets. Before we continue deeper into the full breakdown of this unfolding economic shift, remember to subscribe and leave a like so you can follow the entire progression of this story. The impact struck hardest in Detroit, where factories depend on constant steel and aluminum inflows to keep assembly lines alive. Once the new tariff rates went into effect, the border thickened overnight. Imported metals became dramatically more expensive, and the machinery that relied on steady material deliveries began slowing down within hours. Storage racks sat empty. Production teams were left waiting for shipments that no longer arrived on time. The increase to a 50% duty on steel and aluminum, combined with additional pressure on Canadian metals, created a sudden rupture that spread faster than anyone in Washington anticipated. Within days, steel prices surged toward levels that destabilized entire industrial budgets. Manufacturers that had operated on predictable costs were pushed into crisis mode as metal prices shot upward. Factories that once relied heavily on Canadian materials experienced immediate shortages. The flow of steel shrank, and assembly lines in multiple states were forced to reorganize schedules to keep operations from stalling completely. As material costs climbed, a second wave of effects rolled through the economy. Vehicle prices began rising. Some models increased by over $1,000, others by even more. Consumers unknowingly absorbed a quiet surcharge embedded in metal-intensive products. Corporations warned that this was only the beginning, because the true cost of a 50% tariff would take months to fully infiltrate the retail market. As the market adjusted, the price of aluminum inside the United States became some of the highest in the world. Every product dependent on aluminum, from beverage cans to industrial equipment, carried a heavier price tag. Inventories in major U.S. warehouses plunged, at one point dropping to nearly nothing. Stockpiles evaporated as buyers hesitated to pay inflated prices. For the first time, the country found itself increasingly uncompetitive in a material it once dominated. Producers elsewhere responded quickly. Additional surcharges were applied to shipments headed for the United States, further pushing up the cost of both raw metals and refined aluminum products. When all layers of extra fees were added together, the value of aluminum entering the country rose by more than 70%. The market had become distorted to the point where the United States found itself paying more for basic metals than regions with limited natural resources and higher transportation costs. Large manufacturers across the United States absorbed cost spikes they had never budgeted for. Every piece of metal, whether a bolt, a bracket, or a frame, became a reminder of how a single policy could restructure an entire industrial system. Companies warned internally that the disruption was only in its early stages, and the full economic consequences had yet to surface. Thank you for staying with the analysis so far. Subscribing will help you follow each phase of this evolving story as the global metal landscape continues to shift. As the United States faced soaring material prices, Canada took a different path. Instead of struggling under the weight of the tariffs, the country used the moment to accelerate a long-term industrial transition. Within days of the policy announcement, Canada put forward a major investment package focused on modernizing its steel and aluminum sectors. Traditional blast furnaces began preparing for a transition toward electric arc technology. New hydrogen-based systems were advanced, and the country started positioning itself to become a supplier of cleaner and more cost-efficient metals. Canada's aluminum sector also pivoted successfully. The tariffs prompted producers to diversify their markets, sending more shipments to Europe and Asia. European demand grew quickly, filling the gap created by the slowdown in U.S. imports. Canada's export map changed almost immediately. The percentage of aluminum heading to the United States decreased, while Europe's share expanded from nearly nothing to a substantial portion of total exports. Rather than allowing ultra-cheap imports to fill the space left by the U.S. market, Canada introduced its own protective measures. New duties were placed on steel originating from countries outside its trade network, ensuring that the transition toward cleaner production would not be undermined by artificially low-cost metal. Additional tariffs were added to downstream products later in the year, creating a buffer for domestic manufacturers and giving local industries time to modernize without being undercut by low pricing tactics. At the same time, import quotas were tightened dramatically for non-trade partners, shrinking access to the market for lower-tier producers by a significant margin. Even goods coming from the United States faced a more selective approval system, signaling that Canada was setting new standards for market entry based not just on price, but on origin and environmental performance. While policies reshaped trade flows, workers experienced the results firsthand. Several hundred steel employees in Canada lost their jobs during the early phase of the tariff shock, prompting widespread concern among communities tied to manufacturing. Towns built around steel, auto production, and border trade began to brace for broader impacts. Union groups warned that layoffs could cascade through industries such as aerospace, parts production, transport logistics, and local service sectors. In areas like Windsor, where manufacturing remains a major employer, the economic ripple effects resurfaced memories of earlier downturns. Meanwhile, U.S. workers were also caught in the turbulence. Plants attempting to manage unpredictable material costs faced delays, restructured shifts, and higher operating expenses. Communities dependent on manufacturing felt the strain long before the inflation data reflected the new reality. On the global stage, Canada leaned into its advantage: low-carbon metals. With some of the cleanest steel and aluminum production in the world, Canada became an attractive supplier for regions preparing strict climate-based import policies. European markets, governed by the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, began favoring metals with lower embedded emissions. Canadian producers fit these requirements better than many of their international competitors. Aluminum smelted using hydroelectric power carried dramatically fewer emissions, giving Canadian exports a premium value in markets prioritizing cleaner industrial inputs. This shift reshaped Canada's entire trading strategy. Instead of relying overwhelmingly on the United States, the country expanded partnerships in Europe, parts of Asia, and the Gulf states. Clean metal became a gateway to broader agreements on industry, logistics, and resource security. As the United States constructed increasingly rigid tariff barriers, Canada centered its approach on modernization and global alignment. Domestic demand for cleaner metals grew alongside new policies encouraging local sourcing. Infrastructure projects sought materials produced within Canada, especially those with lower emissions profiles. Federal initiatives supporting cheaper rail transport for industrial goods strengthened internal supply routes, encouraging businesses to relocate production chains closer to home. Over time, these shifts began reshaping entire sectors of the Canadian economy. Manufacturers that once depended heavily on U.S. markets gradually started exploring alternative buyers, from Europe to Southeast Asia, seeking to diversify their risk and protect themselves from unpredictable trade cycles. Companies that had previously relied on foreign suppliers for specialized components began investing in local research partnerships with universities and emerging tech firms, building a domestic ecosystem capable of meeting advanced industrial needs. Provincial governments also joined the effort, implementing incentives to attract new processing plants and modern smelters that could meet stringent environmental standards. In regions long dependent on traditional mining and raw material exports, community leaders viewed this transition as a chance to revitalize local economies that had struggled with stagnation. The promise of cleaner production meant not only aligning with global sustainability goals, but also opening doors to premium international markets that demanded ethically sourced and low-emission materials. Where the United States tried to protect its industries through price barriers, Canada advanced through modernization, market diversification, and environmental competitiveness. The two countries found themselves on sharply different industrial paths, both shaped by the same moment, but responding to it in fundamentally different ways. Thanks for spending your time with this detailed breakdown. If this helped you connect the entire story, remember to subscribe and leave a like so you don't miss the next chapter.